I shall not be able to read anything. The prayers this evening will be said by Pandit Prem Prasad Gair of the Queen's Gurkhas Engineers. Thank you.
Dauho Shantirantarikshagu Shantihi Prithivi Shantirapa Shantirokhadayah Shantihi Vanaspatayah Shantirvishe Devah Shantihi Sarvagu Shantihi Shantireva Shantihi Shama Shantiredi. May peace flourish in heaven, space, and earth, on water, vegetation, wildlife, and everywhere. May we have eternal peace. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Mritam Gamaya. Tonight I pray for you all. This should help you to lead from untruth to truth, from darkness to light, from the unknown to the known, from irrational to rational. Puman Pumamsam Paripati Vishwatah. Human's first duty is to help and protect all. Mitraishyaham chasusha sarvani bhutani samikche mitraisya chakshusha samiksha mahe. May I look upon all with the eyes of a friend. None are less dear to me and none more dear. Madhunakta muto khacho madhumat parthivagu raja madhudevurastu napita. May our action cater comfort, peace and happiness for all and forever. Oh.
Thank you. Please be seated, members. Just a small announcement, a slight change of the agenda. We're going to have our photos taken. I think it's been some time since we've had our photographs properly taken, and I think it's very appropriate, particularly with a new council, that we now have a new set of photos for the coming few years. So that's going to be arranged. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to do two. One with him in. Is the photographer? Just a quick announcement. I'm going to have one photo with Sean the sheep and one photo without Sean the sheep. So future generations will perhaps have the more formal picture. But Sean the sheep is important, and he'll be watching you all tonight. So I hope the discussion will be very civilized. Thank you. I'll take Sean the sheep out, shall we? We better have the more formal one. Thank you. Good.
We're coming around the front now to the speaker's table.
Yeah. I'll take one with me and one with them. Why not? You know, it's simple.
By the speaker's table with the stick.
Okay, yeah. Sorry? I'll stagger without the stick. I'll try, yeah. If I fall flat on my face. I'll bring it with me. Yeah, this is Okay, members. Now we can get down to start the business of the evening. But for that, before we commence proceedings, may I take this opportunity to advise you that if the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated, and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building necessary. I will add, actually, if I see flames coming out of the Beauvais room, I'm going to be the first out the window, I'll tell you that now. So, but at any rate, sorry for the joke, I shouldn't be frivolous on something that's meant to be very serious. Right, these proceedings will be webcast and recorded by the council, but will anyone else be recording or filming them?
I reserve my right.
Councillor Mackay, I must admit, I'm a traditionalist by nature and love to see things preserved, so that tradition is something that I was expecting as well. So, anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Noted. Okay. Excuse me a little bit. My sight isn't perfect, as most of you know, so if I'm slow a little bit in the reading, please forgive me. But I received apologies for absence from Councillors Gooch, English, Cooch, Higson, and Oliver. And I believe, are there any other apologies? No? Okay, so they will be recorded. Thank you very much. Agenda item 3, are there any applications for dispensation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are no applications.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 4, are there any disclosures of interest by members? I see none. Thank you very much. Okay. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? I see none. Thank you very much. Agenda item 6, it is agreed that the items on the agenda will be taken in public as proposed. Are we all happy with that? I assume so. Very, thank you. Agenda item 7, are the minutes of the annual meeting of the Borough Council held on the 18th of May 2024 agreed as a correct record? Agreed? Thank you very much. Okay, right. Agenda item 8. This is where I make my announcements, and I have changed things just a little because what I wanted to do this time was to describe a little bit what the mayor does, because I realise a lot of new councillors here, and some of you may not realise what the role of the mayor is, and it's not just about an elderly gentleman wandering around in fancy dress, it's a little bit more than that. And I wanted to set out the background to it, which is quite historic. We're one of the oldest mayoralties in the county. We go back to the reign of Edward VI in 1548, and other things like the chain that I'm wearing today dates back to 1855 and has been worn by every mayor since that date. So there's a lot of history, and you saw when we came in the mace that was brought in. That mace is the 1649 mace. There is an earlier one that was presented in the reign of Elizabeth I, but that is not used today. We still have it, but we use the 1649, which I always term as the Andrew Broughton mace, because it was largely funded by Mayor Andrew Broughton, who you will see on that board at the back there. In fact, you'll see him twice, because he was also a member of Parliament, and he was also clerk to the High Court of Justice, and he read out the death sentence to Charles I. That in the end wasn't a very good thing to have on your CV, and of course he had to escape to Switzerland when the restoration was made, and Charles II's Act of Oblivion, which tried to find and search out all the renegades, and he escaped to Switzerland and survived with his family. So he kind of got away with it. But you'll also see that the mace in front is always pointed. We follow the same procedure as the House of Commons, and the head of the mace points to the group who have control, or are the cabinet, or are the leading group in the council. So there is a lot of tradition here. It's something I think is very, very important. And what I've also done is shown a list of all the things that I've done, and Councillor Round sitting beside me has also done a huge amount as well. And I'm going to ask him to just go over some of the things that he's done. But it is very important, this, because I've been to a lot of care homes. I've opened one care home. Charities are very, very important, very, very important part of our community. We've one particular one, Spadework, which is charity that runs a garden centre actually in Offham, is absolutely fantastic because they provide purpose for people with learning difficulties, and it's absolutely amazing. You go there, these people are running the shop, they're running the garden centre, they're involved, and that for me is part of our community. We are a very open community, and I think that is very, very important. I've also, some of the other interesting things I've done, I attended several performance of local choirs, and that's important too, because the choirs are amateur choirs, they're part of our community here, and it's very important that we support them. And in doing so, I say this slightly humbly, but when I've been there, they've been really pleased to see the mayor present, because it does provide something impetus for them as well. And I think that is extremely, really, really important. And of course, there are the major civic receptions, like with the Lord Lieutenant and the High Sheriff, and various inaugurations. I've been to Rochester Cathedral for the Mayor of Medway's inauguration, and to Ashford for the Mayor of Ashford's inauguration. And I shall be next week going to the Mayor of Swales inaugurations. These are all important part of the, if you like, the civic duty. But it is very community based. I mean, one of the things that I particularly enjoyed was the Nepali Gurkha event, which was about 10 days ago now, that was held at Yalding. It was absolutely fantastic. They had 7,000 people there, come from all over the country, some from abroad as well. And the Nepali Gurkha part of our community is absolutely incredibly important. So it's, I think, something we need to really embrace, and I hope it reflects the multicultural society that I personally support, and I hope all you do in this council as well. We are a very, if you like, cohesive council. I noticed that there are at least 2 cabinet members who have community as part of their cabinet portfolio, and I think that's also very, very important as well. So, the community liaison and working with our community is an important part, I see, of the mayor's role in the past and in the future as well. I think they're the main things I want to say. There's a lot of events coming up for the rest of July. August is relatively quiet, but then it starts up again in September, and it's pretty full on, but it is something I personally enjoy, and I also think representing this council and promoting the borough of Maidstone is very, very important. And I think the mayor does an important job. It's certainly, everywhere I've been, people have appreciated the mayor being present. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a feel and a feedback of what I'm trying to do and what the mayor represents. But I'm going to briefly hand over to my deputy, who's very ably stood in for me on 1 or 2 very important occasions. So, Martin, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The one thing that's perfectly clear to most people, well, actually it isn't, is that John is actually a stand-in mayor. Neither he nor I expected to be here. And so I have to say, and we must pass this message on to John and your wife particularly, for doing an outstanding job in literally a few weeks' notice. And as a result, John actually booked a holiday. So I did have to stand in for him. And obviously, when the mayor is not available, I have to do all the jobs as well. Sometimes it's 3, 4, and 5 a day. It can be quite considerable. So for somebody like me, when it takes me 20 minutes to put on my socks, that can be quite a challenge to get up in the morning and go through several meetings. Because I'm sure most people have realised John and I are both past our prime. And it takes us a little while to get ready for the day. And as a result, we are very lucky to have a superb mayoral team to support us. And there is Julie, who does a superb job, and then Russell and Ray fetch and carry us, give us our diaries, sort us out, and every now and again, periodically, give us some very good advice. So we can't do it without a team. Having said that, I did go on a trip to Beauvais, our twin town. I had to do it all on my own, but it was a very worthwhile trip. I won't go into too much detail because at the end of the day, I have done dozens of functions already. Many of them are very significant. I think the fact that I went to Beauvais was highly significant. Being in our twin town for over a long weekend, certainly carrying a chain like this, no matter if it's only the deputy chain, but carries and gets an enormous amount of respect, and it gets a lot of pride from not just the people in the twin town, but wherever you go. And don't forget, it's communities that generally invite us to these events. It's not actually a civic, there are civic events, but 9 times out of 10, it's communities that invite us and communities that treat us with a great deal of respect when we go to these events. But before I close, I will actually highlight a number of great events which I think this council needs to know. First and foremost, sitting right in front of me, Councillor Two Sams, I had the pleasure of going to Lenham, where I have to say one of the most greatest pomp and ceremony events I have ever seen held in this entire borough, where the Remy were actually immortalised in the freedom of Lenham Parish. I thought it was a wonderful event and very well done, Lenham. And thank you very much for the pleasure of me being there. It was a superb event. Amongst the many other events that I must mention, and this is where you really realise how important the word community is. Community is an essential part. We all represent a ward. Those wards are often 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 communities. We're here for those communities. We're here to represent them. One community I went to, which was just round the corner from Councillor Cleater's house, I went to their cultural open day. It was one of the most wonderful days I've ever experienced. I met all the children of the school and I met the vast majority of the parents. In that school, there are 37 different cultures and languages spoken, many of which I had heard of and knew. Many came as a great surprise. In fact, there was one big shock that I really was surprised by, and that was the amount of people that had simply left Hong Kong in the last 2 years. And they were clearly suffering a great deal of oppression, and they're now living in Maidstone. And I think it's something that most of us are not aware of. Some of us are aware of the many other disasters and crises in this country, but I don't think many of us realise how serious the Hong Kong situation is. I shall leave it there and just say thanking you very much to the communities that have invited both John and I to these events. It's been a pleasure, an honour, and I trust those communities have enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. That was very well said. And could I add, what I wanted to add is that I couldn't do this job as mayor without the help of, particularly of Julie in the office, of course, who's keeping us all on the straight and narrow, but in particular Ray and Russell. You see Ray and Russell often at committee meetings, but quite frankly, I couldn't physically do the job. Some of the things I have to do, like visiting cathedrals, if you're partially sighted, are actually, I have to say, a slight nightmare because you're going up and down steps and stairs. You've got uneven floors. You've got everything that makes it quite difficult. And Russell and Race are with me all the time, and that is really absolutely fantastic. So a personal thanks to both Russell and Ray who are here because I couldn't do the job that I love doing, but I couldn't do it without their help and assistance. So thank you both very, very much. And thanks to Julie also in the office. Okay. Right. Petitions. I don't believe there are any petitions. Is that correct? I think so. So we'll move on to agenda item 10, which is the questions and answers session for local residents. And I have received notification that Sean Turner wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member for Climate Transition and Nature Recovery.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you to the new council in serving your residents. Considering we have new council members and when the climate emergency motion was previously considered on the 10th of April 2019, no recalled vote was taken. Question: how will Maidstone Borough Council express the support from its new council members and transparency towards its residents on upholding the biodiversity and climate change targets, which include long-term measures placed on the public and private travel, homes, and the heightening cost of council tax contributions in supporting the decarbonisation of the estate and various funding of stakeholder and private partner green initiatives?
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Turner. Following the climate emergency motion in 2019, the Council consulted widely with residents and stakeholders and agreed a biodiversity and climate change strategy and action plan in 2020. This was widely praised nationally for its content, clarity and plain English. Progress against the plan has been reported regularly, and the next annual update is in preparation for the forthcoming Policy and Advisory Committee and then to Cabinet in September. This Cabinet has created a new portfolio specifically focused on nature recovery and climate transition, showing its importance to the new Council administration, and I am currently evaluating the existing details within the 2020 Strategy and Action Plan with officers of NBC. Action has already begun to progress our ambitions. For example, in July the Cabinet will be taking decisions on a project for the decarbonisation of Maidstone House and solar energy investment projects on council property. I note your comment on transparency to residents. NBC publishes data on the website of our own carbon footprint annually, and we will continue to report our progress against the action plan annually. The leader will be setting out our administration's priorities later this evening, which should provide reassurance in terms of our future plans for nature recovery and climate change, all of which will form part of our new strategic plan, which is scheduled to be put to Council for approval in February 2025.
Thank you, Councillor Summerfield. Do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Cabinet Member for Climate Transition and Nature Recovery arising from your original question? Thank you.
I certainly do. Question: now 5 years on since the climate emergency declaration, what current, unbiased and preferably unsupported by the United Nations based evidence can this Council provide to reassure us, the people, that there is an actual climate emergency and biodiversity crisis caused by human beings?
Thank you, Mr. Turner. We do discuss that with the officers of NBC. I personally am a chartered engineer who deals with data in all of my career, and I understand the data sets that are being provided for national and international status do tend to show that things are changing rapidly.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I received notification that Alana Diamond, on behalf of Alcombe Parish Council, wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of Planning Committee.
Evening all, thank you for the opportunity to speak. With regards to the appeals, decisions and applications at land known as the Rear of the Meadows Traveller Site, Lenham Road, and land adjacent to Never End Farm, Pye Corner, why does MBC want to ignore a planning inspectorate eviction notice and a holiday condition in traveller planning appeals, having refused the planning applications in the first place?
Councillor Wilby.
I thank the member of Alcombe Parish Council. Unfortunately, the question relates to a live enforcement matter and a live plan application which is being considered by the Planning Committee tomorrow night. As such, it would be inappropriate for me to comment ahead of that consideration.
So, do you wish to ask a supplementary?
Yes, please. Thank you for that response. We've received in writing notification from Maidstone LPA that they are considering not upholding a planning inspectorate decision on 2 cases. Now, in response to an FOI, MBC has confirmed that they have never, ever before not upheld a planning inspector's decision.
So Ms. Diamond, I have to ask you a piece of procedure here. You have to ask a question, not make a statement, I'm afraid. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, well...
It must have a question.
Okay, I'll ask, thank you. I know the appeal is, I know you're still considering it, but it makes a mockery of the whole system. Why bother?
That's what I'm saying, is it? No, don't need to say anything. I'm going to go straight on to the other question. Yeah. I've received notification that Kate Hammond wishes to ask a question of the leader of the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you think it is standard practice for the Chief Executive to write to the independent inspector of the local plan encouraging haste to finalise his report rather than allowing the inspector the time to undertake further consultation and consider his findings?
Kate, thank you for the question. It is normal practice for the councils, for the Chief Exec and council leaders to have correspondence with government departments, including to draw their attentions to matters concerning the council's administration. Correspondence was sent to the Planning Inspectorate and Secretary of State at DLUC in January and February 2024 concerning the local plan review. The examination process for Maidstone Borough Council's local plan commenced in March 22. By January 24, there have been multiple occasions when further consultation had been conducted. Under the previous administration, the council's correspondence earlier this year highlighted concerns about the timeliness of some of the further technical work and associated consultation to complete the final stages of the examination. Because of potential consequences of delay. The potential knock-on consequences included exceeding the 2-year examination period and consequential risks to the continued viability of our evidence base, which had significant cost implications. The risk of planning by appeal and of not having an up-to-date plan in place, which would reduce the council's ability to protect the borough's community and the risk to achievement of the government's own policy objectives. While it may not have been to everyone's liking, it was reasonable for the Chief Exec to bring these risks to the attention of the Planning Inspectorate, who then made independent decisions concerning the timing of consultation, the length of consultation period, and the issue of subsequent conclusions and main modifications for the local plan review. Responses received from the planning inspectors acknowledged the risks raised by Maidstone Borough Council and confirmed that all usual processes to ensure that the inspector's report was appropriate were met.
Do you wish to ask a supplementary question based on the original question, of course?
Yes, please. At the March Full Council meeting, a number of members voiced their concern over the local plan, and it was how fast it was being, sorry, I need my glasses on, that's my problem. At how fast it was being rushed through. They weren't all aware of that the Chief Executive had tried to intervene in a critical consultation.
Okay.
The letter was just after consultees and other groups had spent money and time responding to the consultation, which completed on the 14th of Feb.
Ms Salmon, again,
Yep,
I must interrupt you. You must follow due process, not make a statement.
Understood.
Otherwise, I shall stop the meeting.
Understood. Although you weren't the leader of the cabinet member, at this point, I ask again, do you think she overstepped her remit?
I was one of those who raised concerns about the timing of the vote at full council. However, as I said in my first answer, it is normal practice for the Chief Executive to fulfil the wishes of the administration. Clearly, we don't always like those wishes.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes agenda item 10, but now we're on to agenda item 11. But before I begin this agenda, I just wanted to say that this is a question and answer session for members, and I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that we have 11 questions submitted from members, with a possibility of supplementary questions as well. So the time allowed for this is normally under the procedure rule, and I'm not going to read it out, but it's part of the Constitution, 30 minutes. I therefore move that the procedure rule be suspended and would ask to manage this item within the hour, because we got through the first three questions fairly quickly. And so is that seconded? So I'd like to give everybody a chance to ask the question. Thank you. Thank you very much. Is that agreed? Agreed. Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay. Right. I received, so we've got a lot of questions. I've received notification that Councillor Cannon wishes to ask a question of the Leader of the Council.
The previous Conservative administration reduced the cost of local government in Maidstone by reducing the number of councillors and holding whole council elections. Crucially, it also found it was able to run the administration with one leader and 5 cabinet members. The new Green and Liberal Democrat leadership has expanded the cabinet. What is the total cost of the new expanded cabinet and their SRAs to the taxpayer over the 4-year term of the new council?
The additional cost of the 2 cabinet members is £24,188 per annum, or allowing for the annual indexation over 4 years, it would be £104,000. That assumes nothing else changes in the allowance scheme and that the cabinet members do not take on multiple special responsibility allowances, which would reduce the cost. However, as you have highlighted in your question, this is more than offset by the reductions in the overall number of councillors, and the increase is necessary to ensure that we deliver what is best for the borough, as I'll set out in our ambitious programme, which I'll be outlining later.
Councillor Cannon, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Leader of the Council?
Yes.
Arising out of your original question, of course.
Yes, thank you. Of that 104k of extra spending, what was the claimed special responsibility allowance of Councillor Vanessa Jones, who left your cabinet after just 1 month? Did the leader not properly consider appointments first?
I think I heard you ask how much Councillor Jones received in her month. I can't tell you that figure off the top of my head, but it would be, I would guess, 1/12 of half of that figure, which is probably about 500 quid.
Thank you. I received notification that Councillor Russell wishes to ask a question of the Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Throughout the recent local election campaign, I noted your repeated campaign message that you wouldn't build on any greenfield sites and that you favoured brownfield sites. In both the 2017 plan and the local plan review that has now been adopted, a number of housing allocations have been made on brownfield sites, some of which are now already being delivered, with the balance being allocated to greenfield. With the overall housing target for the new plan period being circa 19,000 houses, can you detail the amount of brownfield land in acres or hectares that is, as of the 1st of July 2024, left unallocated within Maidstone Borough that could have possibly been used for housing allocations instead of the greenfield sites that were chosen?
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Firstly, to be clear, we didn't claim that we would never build on any greenfield sites. For example, the Marden leaflet actually said that we wanted a new plan for housing that provides much needed affordable and social housing while protecting farm and woodland from unsuitable development. That is slightly different to your statement. Dealing with the substantive part of your question, the Council undertook a call for sites exercise between March and May 2019 as part of the early stages of identifying potential development land for inclusion within the local plan review. Over 300 responses were received, mainly proposing residential use. The sites were all subject to a standardised assessment of constraints through the Strategic Land Availability Assessment process and were either deemed as potentially suitable or unsuitable sites for development. The suitable sites, from the suitable sites, a number were ultimately allocated in the local plan review for residential use. Of those sites that were assessed as suitable but not allocated in the LPR, approximately 30 were on brownfield line, equating to approximately 24 hectares of development land after deductions for constraints.
Councillor Russell, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Leader of the Council, obviously arising out of the original question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure that fully answered my question, but my supplementary is going to be, in a recent TV interview that you did, you were standing with your back to the town hall, you were looking out towards the Metro Bank, and you mentioned you could see a brownfield site right in front of you, and I just wondered, what site were you looking at?
Yes, thank you. I gather there's a sweepstake as to what that site was. So I can't announce the winner of the sweepstake. I was actually looking at two sites, so there might be two winners. And if you look at the call for sites, there's one listed as 053, which is the mother care store. That's one of the sites. But I was also looking at Coleman House, which is largely empty as well. Nobody's shouting house, though.
Thank you. I received notification that Councillor Parfitt-Reid wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member for Environmental Services and, sorry, I can't read it, and Enforcement. Apologies, everybody. In the absence of the Cabinet Member, I will call upon the Leader of the Council to reply.
Thank you. As both the Cabinet Member and Leader are aware, one of my wheelchair-bound residents who is eligible for assisted collections has in the last 2 months been trapped in his home on 2 occasions due to the failure of the waste crew to return his bin to the correct locality. and on a third occasion has his food bin placed on top of his recycling bin, which left him in a position again of needing to contact me for help. What reassurance can the leader or cabinet member give that we are meeting the needs of our most vulnerable residents with regard to waste services, and what steps have been put in place beyond persistently reminding the crew, as this is clearly not working? Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, firstly, sincere apologies to the resident. This has been a frustrating time for all, and your particular resident has clearly suffered. So sorry, sincere apologies for that. The council, through our waste and recycling contractor, does provide assisted collections to about 2,000 homes. I believe I'm aware of the property in question. There have been service issues in respect of it for some time, well before Suez took over the service in March. Prior to then, I know the waste manager did visit the property to meet with the resident. Since Suez took over the contract, I'm aware that their supervisor has visited the property on 2 occasions, and consequently it's now been afforded the very important property status, which means it is highlighted to the crews through their onboard IT. It is my understanding that any service issues to this property have now been rectified, and our head of service will check on this personally to ensure this is the case.
Thank you. Councillor Parfitt-Reid, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the leader of the council?
Well, as recently as Monday, the waste recycle bin was once again put, the food bin was put on top of the bin. So whatever steps have been put in place aren't working. I know that's not actually a question, so I've been a bit naughty there, but we just needed to know that information. Thank you.
Oh. No. All right. Can I just remind members that on supplementary question, they should be questions and not statements, please. Thank you. I've received notification that Councillor Reardon wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member for Planning Policy and Management. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What, if any, progress has been made on the Gypsy and Traveller DPD since the publication of the GTAA in order to accommodate the evidence needed for 529 additional pitches in our borough up to 2040?
Yeah, firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Reardon for his question, because as fellow member of the Planning Committee, this is a subject which I think is close to both of our hearts, and particularly with your low-wheeled seat, where a lot of our gypsy communities are currently based. I think historically, my ward of Penston Heath was famous for its gypsy settlements, but now it's mostly housing estates, so you wouldn't really fit a caravan in anymore. But so, you know, it just shows how things will change, and that brings me on to a really critical point, in that, as colleagues will be aware, in today's King's speech, there was an emphasis on an urgent review of the National Planning Policy Framework. So therefore, all matters planning policy, there has to be a kind of question mark over what, you know, planning landscape we're going to be in very, very quickly, because it's a very quick turnaround the new government are seeking in relation to planning policy. So with that health warning, I'll give you the quite kind of dry technical response to where we are with the GTAA. The final Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment, GTAA, was published in September 2023. As an evidence document during the local plan review and examination. That was all approved and is working through the system. And that GTAA identifies the future need for 529 pitches, as you describe, and 7 plots in the borough from between 2023 and 2040. Any permissions granted and any appeals allowed for pitches or plots since the publication of the GTAA will contribute to reducing the total pitch plot requirement to 2040. So basically that figure that you described of 529 is gradually being chipped away as new sites come forward. With regards to the production of the Gypsy Traveller and Travelling Show People Development Plan document, which you also mentioned, the Council is continuing its work with consultants to complete a pitch deliverability assessment, or PDA, which is required as part of the evidence base for this piece of work. As a next stage of evidence gathering, will help to inform the content of the emerging DPD, and a revised production timetable for the DPD will be published soon, with the next stage being a Regulation 18B preferred approaches public consultation. However, I think it's worth just stating that all of the sites that are coming forward, as you know, to your cost in many ways in Staplehurst, are speculative. Essentially, they're private pieces of land which are purchased and are coming forward. What I'm very, very keen to do is look at the provision of affordable pitches. We provide affordable accommodation for the settled community. We are not currently doing that in any meaningful way for the Gypsy and Traveller population, and I think until we do that, there will be risks in terms of delivery and risks in terms of when we go to appeal, as again, you know, to your cost. So therefore, the delivery of a public site or sites will be a key focus for the new administration going forward, and I know that you and colleagues, particularly in Headcorn, are very keen that we do grasp this nettle, and hopefully we can turbocharge that piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Councillor Reardon, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Cabinet Member for Planning and Enforcement arising out of your original question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for a very thorough answer. From what you've just said, first of all, is the proposed planning amendments with the new government, is that going to hold it up? Is our Cabinet going to wait on that information before moving forward with the Gypsy and Traveller DPD? And if so, what would be the proposed timescale? Because it's very difficult to assume. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Reardon. That's a really good question. I asked that one as well of officers. No, what's happening is all of that background work in the preparation, that preparing that really detailed evidence base that we need to do for all local plan documents is still steaming on apace. So we're doing that regardless of that wider piece of work. And if we take the government, the new government at their word, the whole kind of golden thread running through the review will be how can we speed the process up. So we'll wait and see how it turns out and what happens at the end of the consultation. But I can simply reinstate that I'm absolutely aware of the issues, as are all colleagues on the planning committee and all those councillors who have Gypsy and Traveller communities in their patch. And we will work as hard as we can, and we will engage with the appropriate communities and with the relevant councillors as we take that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. I've received notification that Councillor Harper wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member for Healthier, Stronger Communities.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the Cabinet Member will be aware, it is current policy that the Council will either provide a new or fully refurbished leisure centre at Moat Park by no later than the 31st of March 2031. Amongst other things, the current building is nearing the end of its economic life and is one of the largest sources of carbon emissions in the borough. Can the Cabinet Member for Healthier, Stronger Communities please confirm that it remains the policy of the new Green Liberal Democrat administration of Maidstone Borough Council to either open a new or fully refurbished leisure centre at Moat Park by no later than the 31st of March 2031?
Thank you, Councillor Harper. As Councillor Harper will be aware, the previous Cabinet agreed earlier this year to extend the contract with Serco for operation of the current Moat Park Leisure Centre for a period of 5 years from 31st of August 2024, with up to 3 one-year extensions thereafter. By the end of this period, the ongoing cost of maintaining the centre in its existing form would be likely to outweigh the annualised cost of a new or significantly refurbished leisure centre. That Cabinet and Council also agreed an allocation of £60 million for a new or refurbished leisure centre in the 10-year capital programme. The capital programme is reviewed every year. This gives the opportunity for capital spending plans to be adjusted in the light of changed priorities. At this stage, none of the £60 million is contractually committed. This new administration is committed to developing the borough's arts, culture, leisure and entertainment offer. We also wish to improve the health and quality of life for the whole borough's residents. At this point, at the start of a 4-year political cycle, and before making any firm commitments, it's imperative that we consider how these objectives can best be met. Officers have been carrying out research about what other authorities around the country have been doing to meet their health and leisure policy objectives. I have already vigorously encouraged this. There is a wealth of experience and knowledge about good practice which we are gleaning, and I'm taking time to understand the issues and challenges in consultation with officers and the wider Cabinet. Accordingly, at this time it would be premature to make a firm commitment to open a new leisure centre at a particular date, but I am pleased to reassure Councillor Harper and the Council that the issues he has raised are being actively considered by the Cabinet and myself.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Harper, do you wish to ask a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Based on your answer, it seems that the residents of Maidstone are left hanging with no answer as to whether we will have a continuing leisure centre in the county town of Kent beyond the expiry of the life of the current centre. Whilst I think everybody will be happy to understand that you're committed to looking at arts, culture and leisure, without a leisure centre or an up-to-date
Councillor
leisure
Harper,
centre,
can I interrupt again? Please ask a question.
Without up-to-date
Please ask a
facilities,
question.
how can you address the issue of obesity, which you as an administration have set out as a prime priority?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I say, we are interested in looking at all of the needs of all of the residents in the borough. Indeed, I might point to other examples, as well as obesity, about which I'm extremely exercised. I would like to draw Councillor Harper's attention to, indeed, my own blessed experience as a primary school student at Nettlestead, now some 50 years ago, when I was bused to Maidstone Leisure Centre, in the knowledge, indeed, that some of my classmates had drowned in the river because they were unable to swim. I am very exercised indeed that we have the right municipal arrangements for swimming, indeed offers for combating obesity in the town. I can assure him that we will strain every sinew in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I've received notification that Councillor Janessa Sams wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member for Environmental Services and Enforcement. Again, in the absence of that Cabinet Member, I call upon the Leader of the Council to reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Suez failed to provide a meaningful and reliable garden waste collection service for the first 12 weeks of their contract. Do you feel that residents in those areas most badly affected and who receive such a poor service should be offered forward crediting to offset their non-service and inconvenience?
Thank you, Councillor Sams. So we are obviously aware that there have been service issues with garden waste collection provided by Suez. The reliability of the garden waste collection has steadily stabilised and improved since the early weeks of the contract, and collection rates are now between 75% and 90% on the due date. I am pleased to confirm that Suez have recently added a 5th garden crew and vehicle for the high season of garden waste, and are refining some of their garden waste rounds, which I am sure will help continue and sustain the upward performance trend. Regrettably, that level of disruption to the garden waste across the borough was widespread initially, albeit in most cases not sustained, although in some cases it was sustained. So identifying specific localities for refund is not easy, and a blanket refund for the 3 months would be quite unaffordable to the council, i.e. the monthly income from the council for the garden waste services is £100,000, so blanket refunds at this level would be very difficult. Furthermore, the council doesn't guarantee fortnightly collections to garden waste customers either. However, customers can make the case that their service has been overly disrupted on an individual basis. However, the Cabinet will be reviewing the performance of the service in the autumn, and an associated report will come through the relevant pack beforehand, and we will look at options around the request you've made.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Janetta Sams, do you wish to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. I think probably my supplementary question has sort of been answered. I'm asking, the areas most badly affected must be known by the council in the basis of information gained from councillors and by complaints by residents. Should SUIs pay for this dreadful service and recompense residents from the most badly affected areas with a 3-month forward credit?
Thank you. Yes, hopefully I've answered that in the first part. We will be looking at the variety of options that are available to us.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. I've received notification that Councillor Tom Sams wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member for Planning, Policy and Management.
Thank you. The previous council hurriedly adopted the local plan. How do you see the time frame for the next local plan?
Again, thank Councillor Sams for his question. I think this is another question where we really need a crystal ball, because we frankly do not know what the local planning process is going to be going forward in any detail. I can talk about the current process, and we all know that the preparation of the local plan is currently complex, and it's a multi-stage process requiring significant evidential, legal and other requirements to be met along the way. The previous government had sought to streamline the process, though the detail was not that clear as to how that was going to be achieved, and they ran out of time anyway with the general election. So that brings us into the new territory, where the new government has stated its clear intention to undertake further changes to the English planning system, and this is commencing with a consultation on changes to the government's national planning policy framework, as I just mentioned. By the end of the month is what the government are talking about. Whether that timetable survives contact with the enemy is yet to be seen. However, it is therefore not at all clear how these changes will impact government requirements regarding new local plans, and therefore it's only sensible that this administration and this council takes stock of those changes before it commits to its production timetable. Notwithstanding this, I will certainly personally be seeking to commence the new local plan at the earliest opportunity, as I believe there is plenty of preliminary work that can be done, and we just mentioned that in relation to gypsy and traveller accommodation, and that this can be undertaken while the new planning requirements are discussed and ironed out. I mean, certainly it's worth saying that I think kind of neither of us supported the current local plan and voted against it and the allocations therein, but there is a due process. The hearing inspector, he confirmed the document with some modifications, and the full council agreed that document, and we are where we are with that document, and therefore we need to follow the due process. And a critical issue is going to be the local plan review, but what form that local plan review will take remains to be seen. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tom-Sands, do you wish to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, please.
Based on obviously the original question.
Yes. Lidsing is a garden community put forward within our adopted plan, and those residents have paid many times over to defend their community. To add further, should the JR fail, Embassy would be awarded costs in that process. Do you think it's reasonable that NBC should collect these?
Thank you for that supplementary question, which I think is relating to the additional costs which are being picked up by those communities that are identified for the strategic locations. And this certainly applies to my ward as much as it does Lenham Heathlands and Lidsing that you mentioned. I think that is a fallout from the local planning process. I'm not commit to anything at this time in terms of what we can do around the issues that you described, because it's impossible to do so. But all I can commit to is that we will be looking at the local plan, we'll be looking at the local planning process, and we'll be looking at the review as quickly as we possibly can. I don't want to stray into the legal territory, but I am absolutely aware that the local plan process, it brings real worry and issues and challenges for those communities that are identified for growth, no matter how significant that growth is. And I think with some of the strategic sites, the impacts are profound, and I do acknowledge that, but I cannot commit to anything at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. I've received notification that Councillor Jones wishes to ask a question of the Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you please give an update regarding the Council's progress on land acquisition at Lenham Heath?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I'm told that the land acquisition for Heathlands is being undertaken by the Council's joint venture promoter partner on the project Homes England, and not by the Council. I understand that Homes England have approximately 75% of the required land under option, and this figure has remained unchanged for the past 12 months or so. It is also my understanding that Homes England have preferred to wait until the Council had adopted the local plan review and any challenges to it have been cleared before continuing that work.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, do you wish to ask a supplementary question based obviously on the original question?
Yes, thank you. I know you're aware of alleged intimidation of landowners being pressurised to sell their land. Please can you give more information regarding what you know about this and what actions you are taking? Thank you.
So we were at the same public meeting a few weeks ago where I learnt about the allegations that you mentioned, and they were harrowing to hear. I committed at that point to meet with the two people who raised these concerns, and I have reached out to both parties, and I have met with one of them. I'm still seeking the following person to agree the date with. I'm going to listen, and I'm going to make some decisions once I've heard what they've all got to say.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. I've received notification that Councillor Dawes wishes to ask a question of the Leader of the Council.
I happen to notice that in the agenda that the Council was going to ask private body to be part of the Cabinet member. So my question is, why does the Cabinet judge necessary to take control of those outside body?
Thank you, Councillor Dawes. So if the proposals later on this meeting's agenda are agreed, the changes will not allow the Cabinet to take control of outside bodies, but will mean the existing practice of Cabinet members being appointed directly can continue, or in the case of the Upper Medway Internal Drainage Board, that the Council's important interests are represented by those with the responsibility and authority for the relevant areas from the Cabinet. This is set out in the report later on in the meeting.
Councillor Dawes, do you wish to ask a supplementary?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've received notification that Councillor Forecast wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member of Environment Services and Enforcement. Sorry, I keep forgetting that. In the absence of the Cabinet Member, I'll call upon the Leader of the Council to reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Stuart, I know you've covered some of this. Many treated missed bin collections as a political football. Yet since the local elections, at least in my ward, there's been no major improvements. Therefore, every taxpayer in this borough is being let down. What action is the Cabinet taking to ensure that Suez pays the bill?
Thank you, Councillor Forecast. It's not quite the question you submitted. You didn't mention your ward in that question, so I will answer it in respect to the entire borough. You are correct, though, that some councillors do appear to be using the waste collections as a political football. There have been improvements since the local elections. As you're aware, the new Suez contract began in March 24, and the waste collection issues were widespread. However, in terms of the core refuse and recycling services, the service has stabilised and improved steadily over the 16 weeks since the contract has been running. And since this administration arrived, collection rates have risen from about 85% to 95% for the core services, with any on the day collections, with any missed collections generally recovered the following day. I've attended meetings with my officer team and the senior management at Suez, indeed the chief executive of Suez, and we've helped Suez to formulate several improvement actions which they are now delivering on and which seem to be working. It's not perfect yet, as we know. Both the Council and Suez are committed to getting the daily collection rates as close to 100% as practical. In terms of holding Suez to account, there is a performance mechanism within our contract which came into effect on the 26th of June and is applied monthly thereafter, with maximum deductions capped to 5% of contract sum. Therefore, any deductions for the month from 26th of June will be netted off against our invoices with effect from August at the earliest. The performance mechanism is calculated by considering numerous performance criteria. There are 50 of them. I don't have details. The Mid-Kent Waste Partnership with Ashford and Swale employ a contract officer to personally scrutinise the performance against those criteria and to ensure that deductions are accurately calculated. And in the initial months, we will have those calculations audited by the specialist firm that helped write and procure the contract.
Thank you. Councillor Forecast, do you wish to ask a supplementary question? Again, arising out of the original question.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I received notification that Councillor Spooner wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member of Planning, Policy and Management.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given both the complexity and the controversy of the adopted local plan proposal for the Heathlands Garden settlement, it is vitally important that we mitigate this as best as possible to provide as much reassurance as practical to the public and their representatives in this chamber. Therefore, can the Cabinet Member for Planning, Policy and Management provide me with assurance that the SPD for this proposed development is progressing well and provide a timescale for its preparation? Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Spooner. We have another excellent question, as you'd expect from Councillor Spooner, another very experienced planning colleague. I think there's a really critical point here around the SPDs, the supplementary planning documents, in delivering some of these schemes. As all colleagues on this council know, I have real concerns about some of the allocations, not least a very large one in my own ward, which also requires a supplementary planning document. And I think that is the difference between a development which is going to impact the surrounding countryside and communities in a way which is unacceptable, and a way of making that development acceptable going forward. So the very technical response to your question is that essentially, in relation to heathlands, there's policy LPR SP4 brackets A, which requires the delivery of an SPD, and that future planning applications related to that allocation will need to accord with the supplementary planning document. So therefore, you know, it's really, really important we get that SPD in place so that we can actually kind of shape and manage any application that comes in. And therefore, I can confirm that the preliminary stages of the SPD production for heathlands are already underway, and there's a particular focus on project management matters at this point, because it's such a big and complex allocation. The technical work will obviously follow, and specific details are yet to be confirmed in terms of design and other matters. However, we will make further information available in due course, including an overall project programme, which at this stage is anticipated will last approximately 18 months. The production of the SPD will include early engagement with key stakeholders, along with a statutory round of public consultation. And I think that's a critical thing. So essentially, it's a big piece of work, but around 18 months, already hit the ground running, and there will be consultation with the affected communities and with key stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spooner, do you wish to ask a supplementary based on the your original question?
Yes, please. Thank you. I'm reassured by your response. I'm very grateful. I fully appreciate the complexities of what's involved and the sensitivities. My concern is that if there are any delays, we are laying the whole borough open to speculative planning applications in every field throughout the borough, and we must be prepared for that. If there's any delay in that SPD...
Councillor Spooner, could you ask the question,
Sorry, okay,
please?
so my question is, do we still have Homes England on side? Are we working collaboratively with our consultees to produce those SPDs as quickly as possible, because they are urgently needed? Otherwise, we will face an onslaught of speculative applications across the borough, which we will be unable to defend. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
In response, I just from a very practical and technical perspective, we have an approved local plan, we have a trajectory on delivery, and we need to follow due process, and that's a given, regardless of the other issues and the other considerations. And I think the supplementary planning document that you rightly focused on is a key way that we can make these proposals and allocations less impactful and more palatable. However, I think I really do want to emphasise the health warning around we don't know what's happening to spatial planning nationally at the moment, and that could it could speed things up, or it could throw spanners in the works. We will have to wait and see what happens with that review of the National Planning Policy Framework, and whether a National Planning Policy Framework actually comes out the other end of the sausage machine, or it's a different planning landscape. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Wow, we've got through it, and thank you all members for your questions and being so precise in your answers. So thank you. Agenda item 12, I shall call upon the leader of the council to submit his report on current issues. You have 5 minutes, Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you. I will keep this brief. It is 8.5 weeks since we last all met. 6 of those were in the pre-election period, which rather scuppered decision making, but it did allow us to develop our programme, which obviously I'll come to on the next agenda item. However, last week we were able to start feeding things through the packs. Some of the reports predated us, and we didn't get the opportunity to stamp our mark on all of them. For example, the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, improvement plan. But there was a deadline for that one that we couldn't miss, and we do hope that lots of ideas arrived during the consultation. One of the things that went through the packs that I was keen on was the megawatt of solar power for Lock Meadow, etc. And Councillor Harwood submitting the revised minerals and waste response to KCC, which strongly opposed the ancient woodlands site being given over to quarry. We've covered a lot of the sewage issues here, and I do know that it affected every councillor here, and I want to thank you all for your help in flagging up those knotty problems so that we can get most of them resolved. My special thanks to Jen and Graham and John, who covered them at times, and of course to Councillor English for taking personal responsibility by asking to be copied in to every issue and then taking the time to follow them through. As we know, there are still problems. Early next month, 2 additional crews will be permanently deployed across the borough, which should bring the performance up further. And as I've mentioned earlier, there is an additional crew on the garden bins. Moving to other issues, as mentioned, we had the pre-election period and now a new government following the general election. And I just want to say thank you to the democracy team who just got through the all-out locals when that was called. They've worked their socks off for months, and I'm sure we can all offer our thanks to them. Hopefully they're having some downtime. In terms of the new government, earlier today the King's speech set out that programme, most of which I'm sure we've yet to digest properly, but there is a lot in there that's going to impact upon us, some good and some not so good, but probably personally don't think it will achieve the level of transformation we need, which is why we must do more at a local level. I shall stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. I now would like to call upon the other group leaders to respond, focusing primarily on the report, but not exclusively. You can wander a little bit. We'll let you do that. You each have 5 minutes. So, Councillor Russell first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, I'm not sure after that I'll need 5 minutes. 8.5 weeks to develop your programme. Well, Labour have done it really quickly. Just a weekend, they're in, brand new everything. So I'm going to wait for it for your programme administration because I bet it's a good one. The packs were interesting. Cabinet members turning up to talk against cabinet reports was a new one on me. So that was fun to attend, be involved in and watch. Cycling, yes, some committed cyclist is going to take the route from Marden to Bearsted. So yeah, maybe downhill, but I can't imagine they're going up. So I'll look for the consultation responses on that. Suez, yeah, I know some of my colleagues on both sides have said that we've still got issues. I think ages ago we were told that it wasn't going to be the same people that were repeatedly impacted, and I am a bit concerned that it does seem to be, whilst I agree the numbers have gone down, it is the same people that are repeatedly impacted. Particularly one of my lanes, Burton's Lane, I hadn't heard about for months since the start, and just recently every week again that's coming back. So welcome the additional crews, but I would really welcome at least the general sort of overall inbox being less after a Monday and Tuesday collections. I'm going to leave it there because I'm sure there's going to be more from the programme of administration, and I know that we've taken quite a lot of time already. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I call upon Councillor Harwood as the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrat group, so that I realise that Councillor English is on leave. So, Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the key point that the new leader has raised is that we are in a period of fundamental transition. You know, we're in new territory in terms of the new administration of Maidstone Council, and we're in new territory with a brand new government that's feeling its way as well. And that can be disconcerting for officers, it can be disconcerting for members and for the public. And I think that's why it's absolutely important that we keep our focus, no matter what's going on around us, that we need to focus in a laser-like way on the quality of life of our residents and the state of our borough, if you like. I think it's difficult to talk about. I mean, the leader of the opposition talked about arguing against our own reports, but in a way, it's when you're in a transition, you're inheriting reports that you wouldn't have started where you ended up, if you see what I mean. So I think that's a fundamental point. But I think this is not a time for partisan kind of point scoring almost. It's a time for perhaps a kind of a new commitment that we need to make the best of whatever the new landscape is that we're working within. And over the next 4 years, where we do have some certainty and clarity in terms of the political structure, I think we need to potentially evidence the most disciplined and cohesive, dynamic and business-like approach that we have for a very long time, because I think we need to treat this with a proper business plan. We need to identify what the challenges are and we need to tackle them. And we have some clarity, even though I just said it wasn't clear, around the local plan. And we need to make the best of where we are at the moment. And I just do hope that we can, going forward, work together as best we can to overcome the challenges that face us. We all know the problems. We see them every day. We see them in our town centre. We see them in our countryside. But what we've got to come up with is solutions and answers. And our powers are quite limited, but we do have the ability to influence, and we do have the ability to kickstart initiatives. And that's what I hope through the programme of the new administration and through a very collegiate approach across political groups, across this council, that we can actually make a difference out there, which is what was really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Call upon Councillor Cheetah, the leader of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there's some interesting things in the King's speech. I think one of the things we, as a district, need to be very mindful of is the proposals for devolution, and make sure that we have some skin in the game as district and boroughs, because I think there are some interesting proposals around transport and buses and railways, but we need to ensure that this just isn't the metro view or the county view as it pertains to Kent, because there are a number of issues that we have, let's say, more of an ear to the ground on. And the other thing I would like to say is I was disappointed that I understand that health inequality is now not a priority within overview and scrutiny. We've all talked today about housing, about the need to have truly affordable social housing rents. So whatever developments come up, we need to ensure that they are at social rents, because they're what our working people need around here. You know, I'll throw my son into the mix. I love him dearly, but he needs to get his own place, but he needs to be able to afford a place. And I think there's lots of us here who have family members who are in the same position. Nobody should be worse off than we were when we were starting on our journey, whether it's home ownership or renting. We will work hard for what's best for the people of Mason in the Labour group. We're not into party games, we just want what's best. Obviously, I can tell you that I will be going to Labour Party conference, so I'll be banging the drum on the things that we all agree are important, and I can bang the drum pretty hard when I need to. But just touching as, again, the sewers issue, I think this highlights, if we're going to have this chaos every time we change providers for the bins and waste collection, then maybe it's time we start looking at what services we can bring in-house and have more control of. And I would love if that work started now, because I just think it's really important that local services for local people are delivered in a way where we have control. And I'm grateful that you've met with the Director of Sewers, but we should never really have got to that stage. Doesn't matter who was in charge, people tender for a contract, you're there to deliver that contract. And I think that's where we need to get a bit more assertive in local government, because we keep letting people off with a bedding in. There's bedding in for minor issues, but whole-scale failures are that, whole-scale failures. So I wish the new administration well. As I've said before, when the previous administration was in, we will support you where we think you're doing the right thing, and we'll oppose when we think you're not. And I think that's exactly what you would expect from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleason. Thank you. Councillor, I call upon Councillor Harper, the leader of the Fountain Oakwood Independence Group.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is my first speech as leader of the Independent and Fountain Oakwood Group. It's my third reincarnation as a leader of a group in this chamber, probably a record nobody else has met for whatever reason. So it does give me a multiple viewpoint of what's going on. But I think I'd like to pick up Maureen's last point. One of the things I would hope the new administration may do is to look at where we can bring services in-house over the next 4 years. I think in-house services are much better than outsourced services, so that could be an opportunity for us. I note, obviously, in terms of the King's speech, a couple of big issues which will affect us, and we need to be very much on top as a council, is planning reform, and as Councillor Harwood was referring to earlier, that's going to have a massive impact on Maidstone one way or the other, as that becomes clear in the next few weeks. And the other thing, again, Maureen picked up on, was devolution. I've referred to devolution in this chamber in the past. I think it's something we need to get on top of in terms of discussions with other authorities in Kent and in West Kent in particular, so that we're ready to pick up the opportunities which may be before us as a council in terms of getting better services for our communities. We very much, I think everybody, almost everyone on the council welcomes the statement from Councillor Harwood in terms of Oakenwood and the council's commitment to preserve ancient woodland. Oakenwood is not necessarily the only piece of ancient woodland under attack. We need to make sure that we do everything as an authority to strengthen our biodiversity commitments. One thing I was a bit surprised at, as was fairly obvious last week, was the walking and cycling strategy. There seemed to be quite a bit of confusion, and I know that's now going out to a 4-week consultation, as to its status compared to the existing walking and cycling strategy. And I know I'm planning to have a chat with the leader of the council so that we can actually make sure that the consultation is framed in a way that the community see this as, if you like, an add-on to an existing policy, rather than scrapping our existing policies which provide really sensible and a pragmatic approach to cycling and walking in the borough. And just finally, picking up the leader's last point, which was about, obviously the King's speech does leave some big gaps in terms of
moving forward, although it's presumably only the first of a number of them. I think we may have opportunities to push on some of those areas further as a council, but we just have to be really cognizant, obviously, of our limited resources. So, you know, we will be facing a fairly tough financial challenge, I suspect, next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. I think you said it's your third time as representing a group leader. So it's nice to know, as I said to Councillor Mackay, some traditions we like to maintain. So well done. I'll now I'll now open this item to questions from council members. You have a period of just 15 minutes, but the questions may be on any subject relevant to the role of the leader. Thank you. Are there any questions? No hands. Okay, that's fine. We can move on then. Thank you, members, very much. That was quite a long agenda item, but it was well worth it. Okay. Right. Agenda item 13. I call on the leader of the council to move a motion relating to the administration programme for the municipal year 2024-25. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. Right. As I mentioned earlier, it's 8 weeks in since I was made captain of the supertanker. I mentioned the pre-election period, which has obviously curtailed things. It meant we were shown the helm, but weren't allowed to touch anything. Obviously, that period's now over, and we do watch the new national government with interest to see what it will bring. As we've said, personally, I think it's not looking great, particularly with planning. We can expect crosswinds, strong tides and so forth. But as Councillor Cleater pointed out, there is uncertainty around devolution, which we need to navigate. There are global problems, big storms, albeit ones that are further away. We heard mention of Hong Kong earlier. Let's not forget Ukraine, Sudan, Israel and Palestine. The impacts upon our borough aren't always direct, but they do affect our communities. And we mustn't forget climate change. Global temperatures over the past 12 months, 1.63 degrees over pre-industrial baselines. Here in Maidstone, we can expect a 4-degree temperature rise in years to come. That's going to be very hard to manage. Being in charge of the supertanker is interesting, particularly when it comes to trying to turn it around. But even just navigating the tides, the rocks and the choppy waters can be fun. Before I launch into the new priorities, as this is the first council since we took over, I wanted to kind of set the scene in terms of the new approach, our new approach of putting both people and the environment first. As we've mentioned, the initial PAC meetings were packed with environmental initiatives, the solar power, decarbonisation, flood management, and so on. As we've mentioned, some of it needs more work. When it comes to people, many of us attended Maidstone's first Pride, and what a great event that was. It was initiated by a 13-year-old Kitty, a real example of why we must really listen to young people. We want inclusivity to be at the heart of what we do. Obviously, we've got a new position on Oakenwood, and in addition, Councillor Summersgill's got involved with Southern Water. I've been reaching out to faith groups across the borough. It was great to have the prayers that we heard earlier. But there's lots of other work we're doing. But I know you want to hear about the course we've charted, our plan for the next 4 years. And in line with the previous administration, we intend to use the PAC system to ensure we get the best possible refinement and input into our programme. So to start with the mission, this, as I said, is for a council that puts both people and the environment first. We have 4 overarching aims or priorities. We want this council to be one that leads and advocates for our borough through listening and engaging with people and partners, adapting our borough for the future, delivering quality homes and enabling healthier lives, and meeting society's needs while protecting and improving our environment. Firstly, listening and engaging. We have two objectives there. One is delivering a true partnership, and the second, strong governance in all of our actions. That includes fully engaging with those that we represent and being inclusive for all of our residents. Strengthening and re-energising partnerships to ensure best value and better services. Effective communication in plain language, accessible to all. And recognising and respecting equality, diversity and inclusion. We want to set expectations and standards within an open, honest and fair culture. Evolve the ways of working and be open and receptive to scrutiny and challenge. We want to enforce rules fairly and without fear or favour. The second aim, adapting our borough to make it resilient for the future. Again, two objectives, protecting and restoring the environment and creating a better place that meets social, environmental and economic needs. So this includes maintaining and improving the borough's environment and wildlife through creating networks for nature by increasing tree and hedgerow cover, increasing the biodiversity in our rivers, town and country, taking pride in both rural and urban areas, preserving characteristics that make them special, delivering an improved climate and biodiversity action plan, and improving access to nature through better maintained green spaces and nature recovery. We want a full review of an update of the existing local plan, a review of the current planning policies, and developing strong new ones as well. We want to develop a plan for sustainable transport and improved infrastructure delivery. We want regenerative town and rural strategies that balance economy, ecology and community. And we want to design places that support healthy and fulfilling lives. And we want to investigate opportunities for higher and further education in the borough. The third aim is around the delivery of quality homes that enable healthier lives. And we're going to do this by improving the quality of all types of accommodation and housing, reinforcing residents' rights to safe, warm and dry homes, reducing the number of people who are living in temporary accommodation who are who are homeless, and also reducing the length of time people are on the housing waiting list. And we want to expand the stock of social and other affordable housing available to our residents. We want to increase access to quality leisure facilities and activities for all. We want to review and deliver the Council's Air Quality Action Plan to reduce harmful emissions. We want to work with health sector partners on a joint approach to health improvement. And we want to understand and reduce poverty across our borough and support our residents to live good, independent, healthy lives. Finally, the fourth aim is to meet society's needs while protecting and improving our environment. This means we need to develop a circular local economy and to strengthen communities and build trust. We're going to do this by supporting and promoting quality local jobs and businesses in the town and countryside, investigating and progressing opportunities for local farm to fork markets, working with regenerative businesses to promote a greater balance across ecology, social and economic well-being for our communities and the borough. Develop the current arts, culture, leisure and entertainment offer. Build greater community cohesion based on mutual trust and support and an ethos of working together for a more positive future. Effectively engaging marginalised communities to understand the challenges they face and to improve our policy and practice as a result. And we want to facilitate and strengthen the voluntary and community sector. That's a huge amount of work to do, so it's all hands on deck. We're going to engage widely on the high-level plan. We have roadshows, we will have roadshows, surveys, and we'll engage with partners and, of course, councillors, plus, importantly, young people and hard-to-reach communities. We need to know what we've missed, whether the aims are understood and how we can work together to achieve them. I therefore move that the programme be agreed by the Council, and obviously there will be some debate. It will be good to hear that, and I'll take questions, obviously, but it would be nice if you could weave a dodgy maritime metaphor in or two. Thank you.
I know. Is there a second, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Russell.
Thank you. Wow. Hearing these policies for the first time tonight, obviously we need to understand them in more detail over the coming months. I suppose my initial overriding concern is cost. The Borough Council, as we left the administration, was not awash with spare money. We produced a balanced budget in challenging times, so it comes down to choices. Perhaps the most interesting things to see for our residents in the coming months is what has not been spent on, what has not been chosen as a priority, and on behalf of the residents, we'll obviously be scrutinising this closely. As I look across the administration and the cabinet members, I can't help but be reminded of some of the criticism of our cabinet in the early days, when only a third of our cabinet were women. Today I look across and the ratio is now 1/8. Food for thought. Our cabinet and our previous leader made a choice to not commit to presenting a programme for administration. All of these items can obviously bypass the policy advisory committees, but the leader tonight has mentioned involvement of the PACs, and we welcome that. Although we would seek understanding on the level of involvement, obviously now they've been put forward in the programme. So perhaps if you could come back on that. We feel obviously that it's only with the full involvement of all members and robust opposition that the best policies arise, and we would urge the leader not to forget other views. Just over a quarter of the councillors in this chamber sit in my group. Now, on to some of the new priorities. So obviously they've got to all be the priorities in order to be mentioned here tonight. They sound conceptually interesting, and I look forward to further understanding of them. Reiterating my previous point about cost, I will also add that Maidstone is not a blank canvas. It exists. There's good and bad, as we all know, and things that we'd all like to change and improve. Onto this existing background, any new policy is overlain, and at the moment I feel there seems to be a gap between the theoretical and the practical. We await clarity, obviously, as we travel through this 4-year term. I haven't heard anything this evening about the new administration's commitment to either a new leisure centre or the refurbishment of the current facility. Given that it is the building with the highest carbon footprint within the council's portfolio, and the fact that it clearly links to deliverable health outcomes for residents, I am extremely disappointed this hasn't specifically featured in the programme for administration. I do hope it hasn't fallen by the wayside to make way for wider change priorities. I'm going to leave it there for my comments tonight on behalf of my group. We move forward in interesting times, but we are, I know, on both sides, committed to delivering for our residents. We look forward to working with all of you to achieve good outcomes for Maidstone.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Cleaton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And like Councillor Russell, when we see some more meat on the bones, it will be really good to see how we're going to take that forward, budget for it, and get some really sustainable outcomes for the people of Maidstone. Just a couple of things. I really welcome, and I think any party in power welcomes scrutiny, you know, because not everyone's got the answers, but it always is good to have those checks and balances. In terms of working closely with the NHS, obviously that is directly interlinked as well with a lot of the issues around social care, which it may well be that we need to liaise with colleagues at KCC around that, because as someone who works in the field, there is a lot of batting back and forth. Now it's a health issue, now it's a social care issue, now it's a health issue. So I think we need that more joined up approach. Whether the ICBs are the way forward or just a talking shop is another matter. In terms of the health outcomes, I think we're going to have to be creative with that and involve the third sector as well as local government and the NHS. And obviously the air quality action plan, as someone who has to now use an inhaler, that would be welcome as well, because clearly the better use of public transport would assist people like me, who Councillor Harwood can agree, because he's my councillor, that even in an urban area in Maidstone, the bus service is atrocious. And if I want to go anywhere, it's 2 or 3 buses, that's just to get round Maidstone. So hopefully we'll get something within the devolution that will help us to have more input, more control around public transport. But again, I'd like to see some more meat on the bones, really would welcome that, and then my group can give its frank input into that. But as an overall strategy, there's lots in there to like.
Thank you, Councillor Peter. Councillor Tom Sands.
Thank you. I think you know what I'm going to ask, don't you, Councillor Jeffrey? Developing a circular local economy. Can you tell us what you mean by that, please?
Councillor Jeffrey, do you want to take the floor for that?
Yes, circular local economy. So, what we know from people, from the work of organisations such as the New Economic Foundation, is when money is spent by local people on local businesses, there is a circularity to it that increases the wealth of local populations. But circular economy goes deeper than that. It talks about the resources coming increasingly from local areas and being used locally and being disposed of locally, or being reused, recycled and so forth. So it's kind of got two circles. Hopefully that clarifies the point.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Councillor Thompson, do you want to come back, or are you happy with that?
That's fine. I like playing English.
Good. Excellent. Okay. Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was a very interesting speech. I think there's very little in terms of what you said tonight that people would probably disagree with. I think, like everything, the devil's going to be in the detail. And I'm glad that you stated that you would use a policy advisory committee system to actually get input from councillors. Because I note one of the references you referred to towards the end was your ethos of working together and inclusivity. Well, you know, as long as you include all the councillors in your decision-making process, I think everybody here would welcome that. A couple of things I particularly liked from what I heard. One was around sustainable transport, and as you know, Stuart, I've been a campaigner for this for donkey's years on this authority. My very first meeting back in 2014, I was almost booed at when I suggested we had policies around cycling and walking. So to actually move forward with a really tough sustainable transport policy to actually get a shift of people away from using cars onto other forms of transport would be one I think everybody would probably welcome, with the impact that would have on our air quality and so on. And I think the issues around housing and giving everybody a quality home, and obviously as we move forward with our 1,000 affordable homes policy, that will give us the opportunity to actually put that into practice. One thing which I would be interested to talk with you further is about higher education in the borough, because that's where I originally moved to Maidstone when I was working at the University for Creative Arts, before they decided to move out of Maidstone. There's been a sorry story of higher education in Maidstone, so I'd be quite welcome perhaps having a discussion with yourself and your colleagues on that and some of the issues which perhaps the council might need to think about with that. The one thing I have an element of concern on, which you won't be that surprised on from my earlier question, is going to be very much looking at when you refer to the quality of culture, leisure and arts provision, how do we fit in the borough's only leisure centre into that? And that will be something myself and a lot of colleagues here across the council, I'm sure, will be looking at very closely over the next year or two. So overall, yeah, I think there's a good plan. I think there's a lot there. I think to try to achieve all that in 4 years is going to mean a massive amount of work for everybody in the chamber, but hopefully we can get the bulk, if not all of it, done over the next 4 years.
Thank you. Well, I don't see any more hands up, so my comment is this, Councillor Jeffrey.
One more.
Who's it? Sorry? Councillor Kahili, sorry, I couldn't see you, sir.
That's okay, thank you. You mentioned a desire to understand poverty across the borough. Can we just clarify that and reassure us that you mean to not just do this in terms of money and finance, but also in terms of health concerns, emotional well-being, physical well-being, living conditions and opportunities such as things like Wi-Fi and transport and other things that actually have an impact, not just being poor? Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, the question around poverty and making sure we understand it. One of the things I'd really love to do is a poverty truth commission. So bringing together people who are struggling against poverty to really help inform what would make a difference. It's been done in a number of councils around the country, and it gives a really deep understanding of where we can make those specific differences. So yes, I'm sure a lot of the bits you've mentioned will be picked up through that, but I want to make sure we hear the voices of those that are affected and build our policies as a result.
Is that it? Yeah.
Oh no, we've got Tony Harwood's now stuck up his hand.
Tony, sorry, Councillor Harwood, apologies.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the seconder of the motion, I just really wanted to kind of have a little bit of input. And as regards the leader's point about nautical references, I wonder whether up a certain creek works, because I think in many respects we are currently, and what I hope is that your programme, and I think what a lot of colleagues have raised, where's the detail that sits beneath it, and what you have not heard and seen tonight is there are around 97 really kind of detailed targets that are going to be worked through and kind of the business plan. So I think what we've got is hopefully 97 paddles. So if we're up a certain creek with 97 paddles, it might get us out of it quite quickly. And I think the fundamental point here is around a balanced programme. The previous administration was very much coalesced around embracing growth, but we can't just embrace growth. We have to embrace community. We have to embrace quality of life and our environment as well. And I think that balance is going to be absolutely critical to delivering this programme going forward. I also think the point around inequality is very well made, that genuinely no neighbourhood, no community, nor, dare I say, species can be left behind as we move forward in this new programme. And in doing that, I don't think we can be too dogmatic. I think we need to be agile, we need to be fleet of foot, because we're not entirely sure what landscape we're going to be operating in. And I think if we do show that flexibility and that agility, I think we can make this borough a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood, for that. There's been a lot of constructive feedback tonight, and I would like to ask Councillor Jeffrey if you'd like to sum up, maybe taking into account some of the points raised by members. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'll keep this brief. Tony, why I gave you a list of nautical references and you chose up the creek. Damn. Yes, 97 paddles. Notes to self. Just very briefly, I'll just come back on Councillor Russell's point about the level of involvement of the PAC. Yes, we will go as deep and as involved as we can possibly go. We won't hold back. We want your views. We want your challenge. We want your scrutiny. It is very, very important. I'll probably leave it there. There were lots of points. I think most of them were agreed
on. Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. I just want to say, is this agreed? Because I'm very happy to move on, and you've done, you summarise your position. We have a programme that's been moved by yourself and seconded, and we've had a lot of, as I said, very good, interesting feedback. I think that obviously And we got the packs as well, of course. So I'm happy to say, are we all happy to agree the situation
no, move to the
as
vote,
it is?
please.
Thank you.
Councillor Russell's trying to say something.
Sorry. Claude, you wish to have a vote?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, fine. That's no problem. So who's in favour? Who's for, please? You put your hands up. I think it's the best thing. I'm going to abstain.
I'm going to abstain too.
I think it's pretty well everybody, isn't it? And against? Oh, that's interesting. Abstentions? Well, I was going to abstain anyway, so. Okay, that motion's carried. The motion is carried. Thank you, members. Thank you very much for that. Right, we go straight on to agenda item 14, and I call upon Councillor Field to move the recommendation of the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee and Democracy and General Purposes Committee revise members, sorry, I'm a bit slow on this, code of conduct and arrangements for, dealing with council conduct and complaints. The recommendation is on page 7.
Thank
Is
you,
that
Mr.
seconded?
Mayor.
If you are, well,
I
sorry.
hereby
Yeah,
move
sorry.
the
Yeah.
I hereby move the recommendations that firstly, Council agrees the revised Member Code of Conduct, Appendix 1, and revised arrangements for dealing with councillor conduct complaints, Appendix 2, and secondly, Council agrees the changes to the Constitution to give effect to the introduction of the revised Member Code of Conduct and revised arrangements for dealing with council conduct complaints.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Jeffrey?
Does you want to speak?
Councillor Jeffrey, do you wish to second it? You do. Do you wish to speak? No. Okay. All right. Okay. Is that agreed? Lovely. Thank you. Right. Agenda item 15. I call upon Councillor Jeffrey to move the recommendation of the Democracy and General Purposes Committee held on 19th of July. There's constitutional amendments recommendation on page 75. Is that seconded as well? Yeah, sorry. I'm jumping the gun here, but I assume it will be seconded.
So I hereby move the recommendation that the Council agrees to the following constitutional amendments to delete point I in part B4 2.2.3 joint transportation brackets JTB.
Thank you.
No, I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
That's Councillor Hull. Thank you very much. Is that agreed? Excellent. The sort of agenda items I like. Right. I call upon Councillor Jeffrey to move the recommendation of the Democracy and General Purposes Committee held on 19th of July. Outside bodies recommendation is on page 77.
So I hereby move the recommendations that the Council amends the Constitution to properly reflect which outside bodies are related to Cabinet portfolios and which are for appointment by the Democracy and General Purposes Committee as set out in Table 1.3, and that the Maidstone Street pastors have the limitation to High Street Ward members only removed.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Councillor
Yes,
Harwood.
can I second that, please, Mr. Mayor? Thank you.
Is that agreed? Oh, Councillor Mackay. Sorry, I didn't see your hand go up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's nothing really contentious in here. I mean, Maidstone Twinning Association, you want to choose one of 4, fine. Sea Cadets, one of 2 positions. Upper Medway Internal Drainage Board. Unless you're a councillor, you would have never heard of it, would you? Wouldn't have even known this quango existed. But it's very important to some people in rural communities, and particularly those areas that are flooded. But the proposal is that the 2 positions be appointed are from the Cabinet. Now, I think we're missing a trick here. I think it should be slightly amended to 2 positions being appointed by the Cabinet, and there may well be a member of this council that has local technical input, which is not held within the Cabinet. So I believe it should be slightly amended to include or a member with suitable experience or qualifications. Very minor, but I think we should make the best use of the abilities within the council.
Are you moving in an amendment? Because I wasn't quite sure. But
I guess I am, but I leave it to others to phrase it. I mean, I wrote down here, or co-opt member. That's really given the option for it to be 2 cabinet members, or a cabinet member and a normal councillor, whoever they see fit.
Does anybody wish to second this amendment?
Councillor Harper.
Councillor Harper, do you wish to say something?
I think Malcolm's made the point.
Oh. We've got to vote for it. Okay. Right. Does anybody does anybody wish to speak on this? Councillor Jeffrey?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like a bit of clarification of exactly what you've proposed. What I think I heard was that you want the Cabinet to be able to appoint somebody else rather than it automatically falling to somebody else. Is that correct?
No, absolutely.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Automatically. Councillor Nagy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor. I think what we've got to do is just discuss what we've got at the moment, because my understanding is the Cabinet, that people put their names forward to be on these positions. Am I right?
Yes.
A decision's made, and you put down what you can bring to these committees or outside bodies, and then if there's lots of people going for these, which is not historically, there's not usually a lot of people going for these sort of things, but if there's 2 or 3 people want to go for something, then it goes to a committee or the Cabinet member to see who's the best qualified. Is that what we got at the moment? Because I know in the past ex-councillors have been appointed on outside bodies as decided by that committee because no one was interested, but we had another outside retired councillor who wanted to carry on. So I think we just need to explain for the new councillors what we've got at the moment, and that might help. Thank you.
Councillor Nagy, I actually think you made a very good point here because I mean, I'll be honest with you, I was a member of the Upper Medway Internal Drainage Board, and as was Councillor Harper, if I remember, we did it in tandem. So, but I put an application up for that, and it went to the committee, and it was approved by that committee. I'm slightly lost on why this is suddenly becoming such a big issue. So I thought that, I mean, I live in a flood. I lived on a floodplain. That's why I was interested in being in the Upper Medway Internal Drainage Board. So I did know something about it. But,
Councillor Mackay makes a very valid point, but Councillor Springett and
Councillor Springett, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually support the proposal made by Councillor Mackay. I think it's very, very sensible. Excuse me. And indeed, as you've just said, Mr. Mayor, you've been involved, and I believe Councillor Harper, in the Internal Medway Drainage Board. So your experience in this would be invaluable to perhaps that of a new Cabinet member who does not have that experience. So I support this amendment. Thank you.
To be clear, my proposal was, as the leader, Councillor Jeffreys, outlined, the Cabinet would have the option, or the leader would have the option to appoint the 2 members from his Cabinet, if he so wished, but retained the option of appointing outside of the Cabinet.
That's fine.
So it is really inserting an additional option.
It's good.
So we're not taking, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. I fully understand it now. Yeah, I take exactly where you're coming from. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this is, as far as I'm concerned, really quite straightforward. And I'd like to just emphasise, I think it was on this particular meeting that Mr. Jeffrey said, for once, Mr. Councillor Cook and myself agree. So don't worry this evening. I think what we have here is a situation in terms of the appointments to outside bodies, that there are certain appointments that are reserved for the Cabinet to make that appointment, which can be from the Cabinet, but if not, they could look to members. There are the other appointments that are made generally by the Democracy Committee, and that requires members to apply. So this really makes no difference either way. At the end of the day, if the Cabinet wish to appoint the Cabinet member for Climate Transition and Nature Recovery and the Cabinet member for Planning Policy, that is within their remit. But if there is somebody else and they want to do that, that's also within. I absolutely happen to think that's the current procedure anyway. If we want to embellish that by making this provision, or as the Cabinet requires, I have no problem with that.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cook. I mean, I think that's all helpful clarification on the amendment. Personally, I'm comfortable with the amendment. It seems like a sensible, friendly, slightly better wording than we had. So, but the reason that we want to have that, as I think Councillor Cook was alluding to, the reason we want to have the control about who's on there is because this is such a priority for the Cabinet. So that's the rationale. But I'm more than happy to support your amendment.
Yeah, and if I second the slightly modified.
So it becomes part of the substantive.
It's kind of, oh, that's something. So we can. As both are approved, so we can just go for the main amendment. No, for the main proposal. Yeah. Okay. So we have it's accepted by the proposer and by Councillor Jeffrey and seconder. So I think we can go ahead as originally to the amendment. It becomes a substantive amendment, as I understand it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So it's all tickety-boo. Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, I would agree with it. I mean, unfortunately, it's the second time this year Councillor Gary Cook has agreed with me.
Yeah, we can.
Which I think is a record. Thank you, Gary.
I think I'm starting to get a bit worried, Chairman.
Yeah, so we approve it. If we're going to approve it, we approve it as amended by Councillor Mackay. Are we all happy with that? Wow, thank you. I didn't honestly think. Oh, no. The way to hell is paved with good intentions, and I thought, okay, right, let's carry on. Okay, agenda item 17. I call upon Councillor Clark to move the motion relating to the voting age to 16. Aha, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will just bring members' attention to the briefing note in the papers for today, and I also wanted to mention that a very similar motion went forward in this chamber on the 7th of March 2018, which you'll also see that in the briefing notes. To be consistent with that motion, there's a slight change in the motion that is in the papers, and that is that we're agreeing that the leader of the council should, following the general election on 4th of July, write an open letter to the Prime Minister requesting introduction of legislation to reduce the voting age to 16. So it's just changing that from His Worshipful Mayor to Leader of the Council for consistency. So, following the recent English local elections and the general election, I am bringing this motion today to reaffirm this council's support for voting at 16, a move which would affect more than 1.5 million teenagers in the UK. As members will know, 16-year-olds in England can sign up to join the armed forces, legally marry, have children, pay taxes, pay national insurance and legally set up a business. However, unlike their peers in Scotland and Wales, where voting at 16 is allowed in council elections and in Scottish Parliament and Welsh Assembly elections, 16-year-olds in England have no right to vote. With little or inconsistent focus on our political system at school, we often hear how young citizens are disengaged and uninterested in politics. It's no wonder that political parties chasing the young vote have difficulty reaching their target. However, we can send a strong message of encouragement and empowerment to our younger citizens by supporting the lowering of the minimum voting age in the UK to 16. Members often welcome politics students on work experience, and pupils from local schools often attend public meetings to observe the work of this council. But we can go further by considering an advisory board where students at local schools and colleges across the borough can share opinions and perspectives while giving this council the opportunity to consider issues faced by younger residents. At 16, before leaving home for university or work, most teenagers have the stability of living in the home where they grew up. Here they are much more likely to hold views on issues affecting their community and, given the opportunity, would be more likely to vote. Teenagers that vote before leaving home are more likely to vote from that point forward. In Scotland and Wales, few would argue that it was a mistake to give 16-year-olds the vote. I urge members to agree this motion so we can send a united message to our new government that this council supports reducing the minimum voting age to 16. Thank you, Chairman.
Is that seconded?
Yep, that's seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Do you wish to speak?
I think there's been enough speaking tonight. I just reserve my right.
Okay, thank you. I shall now open it up to members. Any comments from members? Councillor Russell first, thank you. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the mover and seconder for slightly amending that, because that was one of the points that I was going to raise, that I think, you know, the mayor's being put in a political position, so I think it's far more appropriate that the leader of the council writes that letter. Looks like we've been round the block on this once before, so done the letter once, do another one. Being a parent of teenagers, either side of 16, I totally get the importance of their views. I think the youth assembly is a really good idea. And it's something that I did mention before. And I hope that when we're picking secondary schools, we don't just go to the grammar schools, all of them. Yeah, having asked both of my teenagers though, what do you think? Do you think you should have the right to vote? They were both an unequivocal no, for very different reasons. One of them was just like, well, you're just going to get people voting random things. And then the other one was really clear. Whoever's on social media is going to get everyone's vote. So I think, you know, that we enter that world with all of that knowledge going forwards. But yeah, thank you for changing that, because that was my main point I was going to raise.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a problem. And speaking with my team the other day, we don't have a problem with altering the voting age, but what our concern is that under the current system of 18-year-olds, that very few people between 18 and 21 actually vote. We only have to look at the elections we've had over the last couple of months. In the local elections, where the turnout was very rarely above 30%, and then at the general election, where it only was just over 60%. And I suspect most of us, more likely in the local elections and the general elections, would know from our own telling and experience that there were not that many young people actually voting. So it'd be a good idea to increase the franchise, but I think a lot of work needs to be done with not only 15 and 16-year-olds if this proceeds, but also actually in the 18 to 21-year-old group, where people currently have had for a long time the right to vote, but do not vote for whatever reason. And probably one of the main reasons is lack of engagement, as Claudine was saying. And so I would like to suggest that as a slight amendment, that we also put some emphasis to working with 18 to 21-year-olds who are on the current electoral roll, and that the council prioritises engagement with that age range to address how we can engage not only in secondary schools and elsewhere, but to promote civic society and an awareness of democracy. Because if we can get, at the moment, we can work with the 18 to 21-year-olds, if we can get them to vote, then when the franchise is extended to 16-year-olds, there will be the experience of how we manage to engage with the range slightly above them. Otherwise, the danger is that the franchise is extended and all we will do is have 5 million people not voting. So turnout will drop from 20 to 30%, perhaps down to 10 to 15%, because unless we can engage the young people, we really aren't achieving a great deal, except to actually weaken our democracy. Because, if we're going, as I say, to extend the democracy, we've got to engage. So I'd like to suggest that we add an amendment, that we endorse the Council's democratic engagement strategy and request currently work to prioritise engagement with 18 to 21-year-olds. Thank you.
Is that seconded by anybody?
Yes, it is seconded.
All right, good. Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Do you wish to speak?
No, I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, okay, I'm told you've got to speak on the amendment, so there we go.
It probably still applies with the amendment, if I may still speak. First of
My
all,
permission to speak.
Thank you, Mr.
Whatever
Mayor.
the Constitution says.
Thank you. First of all, I fully support the idea of a youth council. It would be good to involve younger members of our community in the process of local government at an earlier stage. I do wish you luck in getting some volunteers, though. I support Councillor Harper's comments about engaging with the 18 to 21-year-olds. Unfortunately, however, this proposal, even with its amendment, I don't think is more than a cheap publicity stunt. The voting age is not a matter for us, it's a matter for Parliament, and Parliament have already promised that they will look at it. It needs a full and thorough discussion on this, because it needs to be accompanied by the introduction of lessons in schools on how central and local government work, the role of elections and the importance of our democracy. Encouraging the young to engage in a meaningful way is a great idea and I really support it. I do think it will be challenging, and I think I know which channels they'll be watching if there was a political debate on one side and Love Island on the other. So I'm afraid at this stage I consider that this is rather a publicity stunt, a waste of our and officers' times in producing all these papers and statistics, and I don't support this motion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I go any further, I just want to come back to the two original proposers. Do you accept the amendment as put forward by Councillor Harper and Councillor?
Chairman, I would just like to say that as background information, where the votes of 16 has been allowed in Scotland and Wales, engagement of all younger voters has increased, where it's tended to taper off in this country where there is no voting at 16. So I'm very happy to get engagement across the board from young citizens, and this motion does mention that we will be exploring the creation of an advisory board, and I think that we can just add it to the remit of that advisory board that we should be looking at younger citizens in general from 16 to 21. But the motion to extend the ability to vote from 16 it stands. Thank you.
Right, I think I understood.
In summary,
that. I think you accepted the amendment. Is that right?
This amendment as framed.
You do accept it. Thank you. And I presume the seconder does the same as well.
Yes, I agree as well.
And it becomes substantive, yeah? Okay, right. I'll just go down the list because other people have asked to speak, but it's now on the amended proposal. Councillor Cleaton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, obviously, we can pass this motion. You're more than welcome to write to the government, but it actually is a manifesto pledge and promise. But I want to just pick up on a couple of points. Councillor Russell mentioned it. We need to stop just thinking about grammar schools in Maidstone. There are a lot of other schools out there, and they are actually the ones who are the most disengaged from the political process. I know how many young people from grammar schools we had involved in the general election campaign, and actually the one group who are the worst for being involved is young men, young boys, listening to the Andrew Tate rubbish that's put out on TikTok and whatever else. So I think we need to have a meaningful engagement, and that's on all of us, because people switch off from politics because of what politicians do or how they act. And the Nolan principles are there for a reason, and I'm happy that we can support this, but I think you're pushing at an open door. But I think the one bit of it is, for us in this council, is how we engage with young people, especially those who are the most dissatisfied, the most angry, and the most who are unwilling. And believe you me, because I know a lot of us were knocking on doors in the general election, that's exactly what they were saying to us.
I think there's Travinsky as well. There's Councillor Travinsky first, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I look around this chamber, I see lots of people from different walks of life, different ages. Struggling to see many under 30 and even less, under 20. There could be hundreds watching this enthralling webcast that we're sending out, but I doubt it very much. I doubt it very much indeed. So it's a general indication of the interest of youth in the political process. And I do believe that we should be concerned about the education of a younger generation on the political process. What parish councils do, what borough councils do, what Parliament does, how the whole thing is structured and how it works. Because It doesn't happen at school. And actually, how to open a bank account, if we can add that as well. But I would ask you all to cast your mind back to when you were 16. Difficult for some of us, very difficult for some of us. However, I mean, I had 4 kids, so I've been through 16 5 times, including me. And I know that at 16, certainly I was busy with exams, busy with sport, rugby and football and volleyball and basketball. And then my spare time was spent chasing the girls around. I did not know what I was going to do in the next 4 or 5 years, what direction I wanted to take, where I was going at 16. And basically, not many kids do. And how you can expect them to work out where they want the country to go in the next 5 years, I really don't see that at all. So I will be against this motion completely. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zwinsky. I can tell you it's a long time ago, but when I was 16, I was actually a member of a political party. But that's a long time ago. Maybe I was unusual, but anyway. Councillor Parfitt-Reid, I think you wanted the floor, did you?
Councillor Forecast.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief because there's a lot of people that want to speak. I think this is a very well-intended motion, and I wholeheartedly support the encouraging young people to engage in the political process. And certainly this advisory board, I think, is a really good idea. All I would say on the lowering of the voting age to 16, I think the drudgery, the tedium and the yoke of adulthood comes soon enough. And I think if we can give children, because they are children, a little couple more years without the responsibility of deciding which direction the country goes, I think we should. So I won't be supporting the motion, but not because of, I don't think there's a lot of good stuff in here. I really think there is, and it's well intended, but it's just that voting age for me, I just think is too young. Thank you.
Councillor Cook, you've been very patient. I do apologise. I should have picked you up earlier.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I was, for Ziggy's information, first elected to a district council at the age of 27. I'm a little bit older than that now, just a little. And I think his short-sightedness is playing tricks with him because there's Stan here who is comfortably still under 30 and doing a wonderful job. I also have the responsibility, Mr. Mayor, of being Maidstone's local children's partnership group chairman. And a lot of what you're asking for already exists. So this whole proposal this evening is a little bit of a waste of time. We've got a situation where you're asking for something that is a manifesto commit from the new government, and the youth advisory group that you're requiring is part of the LCPG work that Maidstone is already a part of as a partner with the police, schools, all the things that you were talking about, Brian. They are part of the LCPG, and we work together for the benefit of young people and making sure that young people's voices are heard. And that's what's so important. Where I completely agree with you in terms of the and what we're trying to do at the LCPG, and members, you are welcome to attend LCPG meetings. Maidstone Borough Council does, it's represented by the community safety unit that attends. We have, as I say, the police, we have schools, we have local churches. If you are a group that engages with young people, you typically, Maidstone United Football Club, Stan, they come along as well. It's somewhere where young, and we then have what was called the YAG, Youth Advisory Group, which is where young people come along and we engage with them. Now, engaging with, talking about young people and in the way that we are this evening is one thing. Actually engaging with them and getting them to engage is the issue, and how we go about that. Now, I know of things that have been done in I believe in this chamber, certainly in the chamber at County Hall, it's been done where members there have brought in school councils and the like to actually to debate in County Hall, and that's been very popular. Usually during Democracy Week, which is an opportunity to go out and do these sort of things, and that's something that we could look at as well. As far as the motion, I'm actually going to abstain simply because I don't actually personally support the 16-year-old age thing, and I've expressed that view to Kent's Youth County Council, who I meet with from time to time, and but I do support actually this business about engagement and the comments that Councillor Harper was making, because that is what's critical. If we don't engage with young people in a meaningful, serious way, then their voice is lost. And giving the vote at 16 doesn't mean you're hearing their voice either. It is actually engaging with them in the locality. Hang on. What we do at the LCPG, because it's a part of Maidstone Borough Council's operation as well, Mr. Mayor, is we have priorities linked directly to community with young people. Children and young people to grow in safe families and communities free from exposure to adverse childhood experiences, domestic abuse, antisocial behaviour, parental or community conflict, with better access to educational, social and developmental opportunities. That's the community side of the priorities of the LCPG. We've then got another banner headline where we look at resilience and empowerment, supporting children and young people to become empowered and resilient through developing core life skills, removing barriers to educational achievement and
Councillor Cook, I'm afraid you've run out of time.
I'm sorry, Jim. What you're asking for is, if one sentence, Mr. Mayor, if I may, what you're asking for is already there. Just engage with what is already there and support the existing facilities. Thank you.
There's two more. I have two more speakers, and I'll give them the opportunity to speak, so they're very patient. Councillor Forecast and then Councillor Jeffrey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, as one of, if not the youngest person in this room, I thought I'd give my 2 pence for what it's worth. I'm not necessarily against 16-year-olds voting. In fact, I would have loved it at that age, and I would have loved more of my peers to argue and debate with me at school, but none of them gave me the time of day. So I do think some educational reform, if it was to happen, would be needed. My main concern with 16-year-olds voting is, and Councillor Clark reeled off a whole host of things that 16-year-olds can do, but there's still plenty of things that they can't do. And I think if you gave them the responsibility to vote and choose the direction of travel that this country takes, then they should be also entitled to do everything else, like smoke and drink alcohol, or drive, not and drive. So for that reason, because it makes where adulthood becomes ambiguous, I don't think we should be voting for this motion, and I'll be against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Falker. Councillor, I'm going to be very strict here. There's 3 more speakers. That's it, okay? Because I think we've all had a good debate on this. Otherwise, I want to go home sometime tonight. I'm sure most of you do as well. Thank you. So, Councillor Jeffrey, then Councillor Varwick, then Councillor Kahini. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I absolutely support the motion. Votes for 16-year-olds, I think, is long overdue. It's good to hear some of the comments. Engaging with young people, absolutely essential. And I think in terms of the motion itself, it's really good to push up from local government to national government on issues that are relevant to our communities. So I do welcome that. Let's hold the new Prime Minister's feet to the fire on some of the promises. I wanted just to point out that at 16 I was a member of a political party called the Ecology Party back in the day. But I really do need to give a shout out to my daughter, who at the age of 14 was a youth MP and was in Parliament on the first time the Youth Parliament was allowed to speak in the House of Commons and debate all day. She is on record on Hansard record as speaking on this very motion as a 14-year-old, demanding the right to vote at 16. So well done, Poppy. So yes, thank you. I do support this.
Thank you. Councillor Barwick, please.
Thank you. At 17, I was getting married, one of the worst mistakes I ever made. So, when you're young, what you need is other young people to encourage you. That's how we engage. And say, I look around here and, you know, I remember when I was that young, I wasn't listening to my adults at all. So that's how we get people engaged. As has already been said, we can fight, you know, 16-year-olds can join a service and, you know, be in the armed services or whatever. And if they can do that, we need to give them the vote. I mean, I have thought long and hard about this because, say, knowing what I was like at that age, I knew everything and didn't know anything. But I'd also like to add, we don't want to go down the road of the votes for women. I mean, it's ridiculous to expect 16-year-olds who can fight not to have a vote. So, yeah, I'm in favour of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barwick. Councillor Kahili, last one. Last one standing, sorry.
Thank you. It's more of an observation. I am for the votes for 16s. I was born in 1971 and I was the first woman in my family with the automatic right to vote at 18. And it was something I ran with. I too was very interested in politics when I was at school and in the sixth form. And I'm wondering if we're overlooking the fact that perhaps people are not interested because they feel they're not going to be listened to, and that because they can't physically, emotionally get involved until they're 18 and vote, that they aren't taking that step and voting, and then we expect them at 18 to suddenly go, oh, I'm going to vote for so-and-so and so-and-so. So obviously there's a lot of work to be done with the youth groups, as I think we're all in agreement with that it's all vital for having a healthy populace voting at whatever age it is. But I think if it's younger, people who are younger will be looking and going, I can vote in 2 years, because I know I certainly did.
Thank you, Councillor Kahili. Councillor Wilby, you reserved your right, so do you wish to speak now? Or?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think enough has been said tonight. I would just one clarification though. You can join the army at 16. You can't fight until you're 17 and a half. So it's just when I think some people are getting a bit shirty about that. Just to clarify the point. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for that, Councillor Clark. You were the original
Thank you,
proposer.
Mr. Mayor. I did want to come back on a couple of points. So KCC is very engaged with this, but the borough, there's room for improvement. And if you go to schools and you talk to young adults, you do find that there's a real gap. When you talk to them about what happens in the chamber, we do see children from Mason Grammar School, Mason Girls Grammar School come into this chamber, but we don't see that across the board. And when you actually talk to students at school, they're kind of interested in what you do, and you explain it to them. You explain about parish council, and you can actually spend quite some time because they are interested and they know nothing about it at all. And it's very patchy as to what at Mason Grammar. I went to Mason Grammar School, and we had a subject called ethical dilemmas, which was really learning all about the political process. It was dressed up with that particular title, but It was led by our head teacher, which was Dr. Pettit, and he was very, very engaging. You came out of that school really knowing about politics, and I think we could do that across the board. That we could cover that gap across the borough. Yes, we did. KCC did agree to this, to writing to David Cameron at the time in 2014. The reason they did that is because I put a motion forward in 2014 to do so, and it received cross-party support in the chamber. We did a similar thing in 2018, where we wrote to Theresa May. Sorry, I'm trying to think of myself to camera. Theresa May. And we're now doing the same thing. Yes, there's a new government. Yes, there is talk about voting at 16, but it was not in the King's speech today. I did actually have an amendment that I was actually putting forward if that was specifically mentioned, but it wasn't. So I think that what we're doing here, we're basically telling the new government that this borough supports voting at 16, and I hope you'll support that. Thank you.
All right. Right. We have a motion proposed, seconded, and it's the amended version. So make that very, very clear. So I'm going to ask all those if it will be referring it to the cabinet, as I understand the process. So I ask those in favour to vote now, please. This is the worst part of the job, I think. Okay. Abstentions. Okay. Right. And that's the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Wow. Okay. We're on to agenda item 18. I call upon Councillor Harwood to move the motion relating to nature recovery declaration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, hopefully this isn't a contentious motion, and if we do approve this evening, it will be referred to Policy Advisory Committee. They will be able to discuss it. Then it will be referred on to Cabinet from that point. But I think we all know there's a problem. I mean, there's something called shifting baseline syndrome, where you forget how much nature we've actually lost. And if you think back a few years, we used to walk through fields and they were full of butterflies. And then you look at the science, and since 1977, 80% of our butterflies have been lost. I mean, when you used to drive down Headcorn Strait, you used to see the wheeling flocks of lapwings. They've gone, and half of our birds have declined since the 1970s. So this is real, and I think Maidstone potentially has a role. You know, it can't save the world, but it can be a champion for nature. And what this declaration seeks to do is be an overarching statement. So it's for officers as much as it's for members, and for policy development and so on. And we have to change the way that we do things. I'm very aware that we do have a biodiversity and climate change document, and there are documents in it, but the decline hasn't slowed down. The decline is accelerating, and there's all sorts of things we're doing through planning policy and through our grounds maintenance, which is not necessarily good, and with some small changes we could make a difference. There are lots and lots of policy initiatives working through. I mean, we know about biodiversity net gain. Those of us who are involved in planning, we're very aware of the Environment Act 2021, which contains a lot of things that local authorities need to do. Kent County Council has approved its local nature recovery strategy, Making Space for Nature Kent, which Maidstone Borough Council can support and drive through. I think in the countryside, with our farming communities, environmental land management is going to be a massive change. And I think the council needs to be properly engaged with that and supporting our rural communities and our rural businesses in delivering that necessary change. So I just want to move what's on the paper. The actual full declaration is set out at page 80, and it attempts to name check all of the new legislation and guidance which is coming through the system. If we do agree to the Nature Recovery Declaration, we'll be the first local authority in Kent to have done so. So it would kind of put us out ahead of some of the others. And, you know, frankly, I'm not a great fan of tokenism, but I think what this does is it fits into two sides of A4 what this council needs to deliver and needs to achieve if we are going to stop the rot. And if we don't stop the catastrophic decline of nature, it's not just about the quality of life, it's about our economy, it's about the water we drink, it's about the air we breathe. We can't go on the way we are. Thank you.
Councillor Rodwell, I believe you are the seconder for that.
Yes, I am. Can I
Do you wish to speak now,
yes,
or
please.
reserve your right?
I'll speak now, if that's okay. So, reading the State of Nature report in 2023, it does make really depressing reading. And regarding the decline of species, we only have to look around our borough to see the destruction of so much habitat because of the development in our area. And on the wildlife walks that I lead, people are saying to me, where are the bees, where are the butterflies, where are the cinnabar moth caterpillars that we should be seeing now? And I live on the river. There were hardly any mayflies this year. There should be swarms of them. And leading up to the election, I often heard this phrase that we need to preserve our precious green spaces. I said the same thing. But we need to do so much more than this. And this is why I'm seconding this motion for a nature recovery declaration. It proactively sets out a comprehensive pathway for making more space for nature. It's about expanding and enhancing our precious green spaces. It's about connecting them up, the hedgerows and the trees, because we know that biodiversity does not survive in isolated pockets any more than we do. And it's also about making informed decisions when it comes to habitat management. You know, we have a river in Maidstone, we have wetland. Nightingales were singing in the wetland earlier this year. It was amazing, the very first time I've ever heard it. We have heathland, we have woodland, we have meadow and scrub and urban areas, but one size does not fit all. And a good analogy for this is the tree planting initiatives that many places have, where there's a lot of publicity, we plant the whips, but within 2 years they're all dead because they might not be the right tree in the right place at the right time, and they're certainly not watered. So we have some wonderful initiatives from individuals and organisations across Maidstone, and they're doing a fantastic job bringing nature back into our community. But let's provide some leadership, more coordination. Let's embed nature recovery into all our policies, our plans, and our decision making. And let's work with our partners, businesses, farmers, organisations and individuals, drawing on a wealth of experience in promoting nature recovery. And let's have a measure of accountability. I'm really pleased to see that there's an element about overview and scrutiny monitoring this project. And we know that we are intrinsically linked to nature as we're intrinsically linked to each other. And our council working model should reflect this. So let's embed nature recovery into the processes that drive this council, that drive the changes within our community. Because like any seed, once it's planted in the right environment and it has the right conditions and it's given the right nurture, it will thrive. And if nature thrives, then so will we. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Councillor Russell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know you guys have only been the administration for 8.5 weeks, but you are the administration. You have no need to put forward motions to full council in this way. The motion hasn't had the benefit of officer advice or input when they could easily been instructed to write a full report on this to send it to a pack. It's 2 pages with no supplementary information, costs associated with the work, or detail as to how this translates into policy and the medium-term financial strategy. For example, a new senior officer is mentioned within point 7. If I can be clear, we do not object to much of the principle or indeed the ideas, but you guys are the administration, no longer the opposition. So why don't you bring this in full to a pack instead of to full council? And I think on this basis, I'll be abstaining.
Thank you. Councillor Stravinsky, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very quickly, I don't have any objection to the motion in particular, but one overriding thought is that I do not want to see our farming communities damaged economically by any of the actions that might arise out of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Harper, please.
Yeah, I think this is a bit of a no-brainer. I'm sure most people here can support this. I've been involved with the environmental movement for decades, probably from talking about earlier, from about 16 when I was in things like Friends of the Earth. I think this is important for councillors and the community, but also officers to embed in the way we work. I'm conscious that the recent declaration of a number of local nature reserves, that process was really painful because I'm a member of the Fant Wildlife Group, and to get Fant Wildlife amongst 3 others declared local nature reserves took about 4 or 5 years to do. So if we actually are going to implement this, we do need to make sure that when we're looking at projects like that, they don't take 5 years, so they're done much quicker and a much simplified thing to actually get nature improved and to, start to mitigate the impact of the climate change on our environment. I'm an urban councillor. I think there's 1.5 farms in Fant and Oakwood, but about 9,000 or 10,000 residents. The Woodland Trust have a really good scheme for community groups. You can apply as a community group for up to 480 saplings every year, and I've actually just put in 2 applications for 2 groups I'm involved with, and that, if you have a relevant landlord, such as Maidstone Council, enables you to actually make a difference in our local parks. We've got parks across the urban area now. I can see Tony knows what's probably going to come next. Unfortunately, we did have a slight hiccup recently. Having planted 1,500 trees, the council inadvertently went out and cut them all down with a lawnmower. But I've had an apology, and they've told me that they've learnt the lesson, that they will make sure that when we do these things in future, that won't happen. And on the basis of the council's planting 1,500 replacement trees, I've ordered another 600, which I will get the community to plant alongside that. So I think small things like that are ways we can embed this. But I would urge everybody to get involved with their local communities, look at your local parks. Our Parks Department is very open to creating nature areas and small areas of copse and woodland in it, and that is the type of way we can actually put this into action.
Are there any more questions? No. None? Good. I heard a voice. Councillor Mackay, Crystal Palace speaks again. Okay, thank you.
And Paddy. It's always nice to have a fellow Crystal Palace supporter in the chair. Thank you. really, as Councillor Russell said, this shouldn't have come to this council at this stage. But I was involved in a motion on climate change. And that did come before this council, I think it was in 2019? And 18.
18.
I stand corrected.
Mm.
Whatever. And this council fully embraced it, and not once did anybody question the cost of it. But the reality is that motion had to go forward. It was at a later date, the council had to approve the monies to be spent. And it did so willingly, graciously, and this will be a similar situation, I believe. So we are merely tonight voting on a principle, and I hope it will go forward, it will be examined, it will be costed, and positive proposals will come forward, and we will have the opportunity to vote on them. We are voting tonight merely on motherhood and apple pie. All right? I will say my piece. I've done.
Councillor Reardon, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say in my ward, I've been heavily involved in tree planting, wildflower areas, encouraging all council buildings to go to eco-friendly energy suppliers. So I embrace many of the things on here, but, sorry about the but I do agree with Councillor Russell, whereas if we are really to put these things into action, it would be better to go to a PAC, be fully funded, and come back to council, so it will then be a tick box exercise. I don't think anyone would actively object to these items. It's just to approve it in a way that it's going to be implemented. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Reardon. Are there any more questions? I can't see any more. So. Okay. I would like to go back to Councillor Harwood then, who was the original proposer, to summarise.
Just to sum up, this motion will go to a policy advisory committee and then it will go to cabinet. And it is absolutely overarching and cross-cutting. And on the point around it being motherhood and apple pie, if you don't have any pollinating insects, you don't get any apples. And so I think it's quite important we vote for it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Right. Okay, we discussed this very fully, I think. Now, I'm going to stick with the rules just a little bit here, but it's in line, I think, with what Councillor Harwood has already proposed. But in accordance with Procedure Rule 12.9.3 of the Constitution, if there's no proposal to refer it directly to the Cabinet, I will refer the matter to the relevant Policy Advisory Committee, having sought the advice certainly of officers here, and I've listened to the original proposal as well. So, but the proposal is to go to the PAC. I'm not going to put this as a direct vote. Is everybody agreed with that? Because it's going to a PAC. Agreed. Thank you, everybody. I think that's a very sensible conclusion, if I may say so. Right. Thank you very much. It's been quite a discussion and a long one. So I will formally declare this meeting closed. Thank you. And thank you very much, everybody. Yeah, I'll come back for my stuff. There is a load of, don't worry, I'll come back anyway. I'll leave my pen.